Okay, good morning, everyone. Truthfully, if you must know, this is about the 10th time I've recorded this video. So hopefully this time there won't be any interruptions. My cat and my dog have been going crazy since last night. So I am hopeful that this will be a successful recording. So welcome to week 3. This week we'll be talking about the social context of mental health in our mini lecture. But before we get into that, I have a few announcements. So first of all, I want to say great job on the discussion board. You have been doing an excellent job bringing in different perspectives and insights and making for a really good discussion. So good work there. A couple of announcements regarding the discussion boards though. So participation, it's super important. 3 points a week. Remember that you should be giving at least 2 pair responses to the reaction posts and 2 pair responses to the discussion post and 1 pair response to the reaction post, okay? So be sure to read over the syllabus and make sure that you are getting in your participation each week. With that said, in terms of a timeline, ideally you should have all of your peer responses completed by Saturday. For instance, discussion questions are due on Thursday, so ideally you should have your responses to your peers completed the following day on Friday, okay? Next, this week, for those who do not have the 3rd edition of the book, I have gone ahead and uploaded the chapters so that you have access to the reading. It is on the learning platform, so you can check it out there. And last but not least, when it comes to completing the assignments, I really love to see you pull in as much material as possible. So it's great to put the different materials in dialogue with each other, if you will. So say there's a film or something from the mini lecture, an article in the chapter. Tapping on each of those and pulling in the different resources, I find makes for like a really nice nuanced discussion. So for those who have been doing it, keep it up. And this is also a recommendation for all of us to continue to develop your reaction posts and discussion questions answers each week. So now let's segue into this week's mini lecture. I find this topic or this week to be starting to get juicy, okay? So we're talking about social context. And what we're really going to begin to think about then is how does society or the social environment generate inequality, right? So in the following weeks, we'll be talking about race, we'll be talking about class, we'll be talking about gender. And we'll be looking at these mental health, like the topic of mental health rather, through like a lens of inequality. So what are the gender disparities? What are the racial disparities when we talk about mental health, and why might those exist, right? Why might there be higher rates of depression and anxiety among certain communities or groups than others? And well, as sociologists, what we want to do is look at the society and culture that mental illness is embedded in to better understand what might be driving those inequalities. And so today we're just kind of do a brief recap, or for those who are new to sociology, just go over some foundational concepts to better understand what we really mean by the societal context that the mental health issues are embedded in. So first and foremost, we have to start off with a couple of basic terms, and that would be society, culture, and social norms. So a society is a given group of people that share a territory and a culture. And in that means that culturally they share beliefs, values, languages, and customs, right? And so essentially in a society, that's our way of having a common understanding, right, about what is expected normative behavior, what's deviant behavior, and how do we decide that? Well, we decide that through what are called social norms. So social norms essentially establish what the rules of behavior are, what is normal and what is considered deviant. Sorry, my dog is kind of whining in the background. He's a big baby. And so, for example, as children, many of us learned that it is not socially acceptable to pick your nose, right? So if you see a toddler picking their nose, you might be like, oh, okay, you're not gonna think anything of it. However, if you go into Dunkin' Donuts and the lady who's making your coffee is picking her nose, we might be a little concerned, right? Societally, we have decided that is taboo, that is not acceptable behavior. And so this goes far beyond just like our bodily functions, right? It comes down to even how we speak, how we dress, how we maneuver, and even how we greet each other, right? And so within the context of mental health, we want to understand not just how mental illness is defined, We also want to understand what are the various institutions, if you will, that may perpetuate, reproduce, or generate mental health issues, such as stress, right? And so, on a societal level, this is where we really get into the meat here and talk about, okay, while mental health may be like an individual personal issue, of course, how might something like class inequality, right, and poverty drive mental health issues, right? How is poverty connected to mental health? How is racism connected to mental health? How is sexism or transphobia or ableism connected to mental health, right? And then if you occupy multiple identities, such as having your race, your class, your gender, right? How do those converge to create very unique social positions for different groups? And also, therefore, mental health conditions. And so this is kind of the groundwork that we're going to need to be able to move into the following weeks that are coming up and examine kind of by a case-by-case basis, how does one's class status, if at all, connect to the way in which they experience mental health and the kinds of problems, right, that some groups may experience more than others. So one concept I usually like to draw on that I think is really relative here is what's known as Maslow's hierarchy of needs. And the idea essentially is that if your baseline needs are not fulfilled, it is harder for an individual to get to those higher level of needs. So you have safety, security, and then at the top of like this, it's like usually like a triangle. I wish I drew a little picture of it. You have self-actualization. And so it's interesting to consider how can issues such as racism or sexism really interfere with individuals, right? Groups' needs, base needs being met. I believe next week on the syllabus, just give me a second here, we will be talking about social class, right? And so this week, our job is really to think about what are the different institutions that make up society. So the politics, the education system, the healthcare system, even our families and where we live, such as our neighborhoods, right? Our communities. So when we move into next week, we want to think, how does class connect to the quality of or experiences in those institutions, if at all? So this week, our job is to just broadly begin to think of social context, especially from the lens of, do certain social contexts produce more stress in certain places, across certain different times, among different people? Okay? And so this will be interesting for you to examine in your own life as well. Do you find that in your own world, do you feel that you maybe grapple with some issues that others do not, right? Being college students, maybe juggling jobs. Do we have sick parents at home or children, young children to take care of, or family members, right? And does social class or gender or race at all map onto this, right? Something I like to commonly think about when it comes to mental health and social context in class, for instance, is the education system, right? There are so many disparities. It's called the education gap by class, right? And so we know that wealthier students actually are outpacing their lower income counterparts. And so, right, from a non-sociological standpoint, one might just argue, well, maybe they're smarter, but we're like, that's not really sufficient. And so what sociologists examine are the quality of the schools, the size of the classrooms, the type of teachers that are present, and how education is mediated by class factors, right? And so this week, I want you to dig in and begin to think about how is stress mediated by social context. And then in the reaction post and in your discussion questions, I'd love for you to pull that in, right? And think about how is this stress, right? And there are different types of stress, right? The reading for this week really goes into like the different models, right? There's a biological model, and then there's like a social engineering model. And so we want to think about how is stress something that's actually socially engineered, which is interesting to think about because it seems like, again, a very individual phenomenon. So with that said, looking really forward to all of your insights this week. Please remember to respond to your peers by Saturday at the latest. Remember, there should be a total of 3 responses that you make to your peers. And of course, if you ever have any questions or need to reach out, I'm always available for office hours. So with that, have a great week. I hope you all enjoyed the long weekend, and I'm looking forward to getting into the discussions this week. Bye.